Welcome to the latest special edition of Last Bowl Boxing, joined by Mick. Good evening, Mick.
Good evening, mate. How are you?
Oh, good. A little bit nervous about this topic, I'm not going to lie, Mick, but we promised to play nicely and keep it as factual as we can. So, you've kindly agreed to come on the show to talk about, does the sport of boxing have a drug problem? So I'm going to hand it over to you in a minute, but I'm just going to set the parameters a little bit. So obviously Jean Munguia is the latest to have come out and failed a drug test. Obviously, he's from a certain gym in Mexico or America, however you want to look at it, who maybe have a little bit of a history of people failing drugs. But I know it's a broad question, but I'll hand it over to you. What's happening, Mick?
I think you asked the right question at the start. Does boxing have a problem with drug taking and drug cheats? I think it definitely does, and it always has. But at the moment, it's starting to become. I don't think it's happening more. I just think it's a case of there's more getting found out. I mean, it's like you say, Jaime Munguia is the latest one, and it's came off the back of a huge career-defining fight for him. Obviously, Jaime Munguia has been in with the likes of Canelo, etc. He's been in with the likes of Liam Smith. He's never come near to getting stopped. And yet, Sriracha stopped him last time out of nowhere, huge upset. And he goes into this rematch. And then suddenly afterwards, he wins and he pops 34 testosterone metabolites. And it's just not a good optic, is it? Like you say, you mentioned the gym, and obviously there's nothing there that points any fingers at Eddie Reynoso. There's no proof that he's had any wrongdoing or he's had any involvement. But the issue that I have with that is when it happens once, it's obviously it's a one-off. It could happen. When it happens twice, that's a coincidence. When it starts happening 3 and 4 times, the serious questions need to be asked about the practices within a gym. For me, I mean, if you look at the history there of the Reynoso gym, so you've got 2018 Canelo, Clenbuterol. That was after the first Golovkin fight, just in time for the rematch, which got delayed, and rightly so. Canelo served a ban for that 6-month suspension. 2019, you then have Julio Cesar Martinez, who's gearing up for the WBC title fight against Rosales. And if you remember, that was coming off the back of the no contest he had with Charlie Edwards. Again, he's fighting for a WBC title. 2021, one of the worst ones for me, Oscar Valdez. He's getting ready to fight Conceição, and he pops dirty. Was it fentanyl? I think it was that he popped for, and that fight actually went ahead. He popped before the fight, the week ahead of the fight, and that went ahead. Obviously, there was a lot of involvement with the WBC with that as well. Again, fighting for a WBC title, and then we have obviously Jaime Munguia in 2025. So when you're talking, there's 7 years of fighters, a span of 7 years where fighters within the same gym have popped for banned substances.
Would you do, Mick? Are we talking about having a governing body in boxing? Are we talking about a 3-strike rule? Because it's not like they're playing tiddlywinks, is it? You know, they're going in there to take somebody's head off.
Well, that's what I mean. It's not like you're playing tennis where, you have an advantage. This is a game where people can die. And we've seen it all too many times in the past. Even as recently as look at the likes of Nick Blackwell, for example, in the UK. This game can really damage lives. It can end lives. It can damage lives, and not just of fighters, but of the families associated. Anybody around these fighters when they sustain these injuries. It's something that needs to be really grabbed hold of. Like you say, a governing body who's put together specifically for this. I mean, you have the likes of VADA, who, yeah, they'll report they've found adverse findings and whatever else, but they can't do anything. Yeah, they can't do anything. And then obviously you look at the likes of the WBC, for example, and I'm obviously picking the WBC because they do have a strong affiliation to the gym I've just been talking about, the Reynoso gym, and the fighters in that gym. Over the years, they've shown they've got a strong association there.
By
I mean, say again, sorry.
Maurizio Sullivan, really, isn't it? That's
correct. Yeah. And the problem is there. And again, I'm not going to throw accusations around. I can just talk about my perception. How many times is the WBC going to let somebody who has popped dirty then fight for their title? I mean, Canelo, when he popped, Maurizio Sullivan came out and actually said, I'm not going to get involved in the delaying of the Golovkin rematch. He had nothing to do with it. He didn't want to chastise Canelo, anything, even though the result was there. Fair enough. There's one. Then you have the Valdez fight. And Valdez popped dirty a week before the fight. I think it was a week before. I'd have to double check, but positive it was about a week before. And bearing in mind, the WBC and their clean boxing program, they use VADA results. That's what they do. Yet, Maurizio Sullivan came out and said they were going to be looking to use the WADA stipulations and rules for that fight, which then meant that Valdez didn't pop dirty because the allowed limit was higher. So you've literally picked the goalposts up, moved them to allow somebody to then go and fight for a WBC title. The problem is when you've got these governing bodies like the WBC, WBO, they have a vested financial interest. They get their 3% regardless. The bigger the fight, the bigger the purse. So if that was me, I would want to let the fight go ahead. That's the problem. We need somebody who's impartial.
We know the problem, mate. How would you remedy this? Because there's quite a lot of moving parts to this problem, isn't there? You've got the fact that you've got a load of different authorities depending on where you are in the world. So you've got commissions all over America. You've got British Boxing Board control in Britain. Then you've got the fact that boxers now have a big, large team. I still believe the ultimate responsibility stays with the fighter. However, you have to accept that there's a lot of nutritionists now, a lot of people within their camps. So it's a difficult conundrum, right? It's a difficult one.
The problem is, and you've just said it, no matter what, it sits with the fighter. Strict liability. They put these substances into their body, whether it be through food, through supplements. I mean, yes, when these fighters are coming up and they're not earning mega money, it's going to be hard to sort of lean on these professionals because they haven't got the backing financially. Whereas when you're looking at some of these fighters, people like Canelo, Valdez, Munguia, Ryan Garcia, all of these guys, multi-millionaires, huge teams, they have the resource to make sure that these substances don't end up in their system. There's no excuses there. There's no excuses at all. Strict liability for me. When they're caught, when they're found, regardless of the situation, strict liability needs to be adhered to. A prime example for me was Conor Benn. Conor Benn obviously failed 2 tests, as we know, for clomiphene. Regardless of how it got in his system, it was in his system. Everything that goes into him is by his doing, unless he's going to admit to being there and getting injected by folk without his knowing, which nobody would. So strict liability for me. And yeah, if it's a case of it has been completely unavoidable, then a reduced ban. But I really think we're getting to that point now where we need to see somebody of a big name get a lifetime ban. I really believe we do.
Happen, though?
Because
I don't think it'll ever happen.
I don't, not a chance. It'll never happen. I mean, boxing, for people outside of boxing and people who don't follow it as much as the likes of me and yourself do, boxing is seen as one of the most corrupt sports there's ever been. Right back to the very early days of bare knuckle boxing. Promoters, managers, whatever else, they've always been seen as corrupt, and that's still the same now. Whether it's true or whether it's not, that's just the perception of the common Joe Blogs on the street. That for me, it needs to happen. I mean, now we're in a new time. We've got Uncle Turkey, who's got all of the financial resource that you could possibly need. This is the time. If you're going to start putting together this, like you've spoken about, this super fight league and whatever else, then let's do it the right way.
And this is just my opinion. The more dough that's on the table, the more people look for that odd percent here and there to improve the performance, right? That's my worry.
Yeah, for sure. It's always going to be, it's always going to be an issue because people are going to say it as, well, I need to do this to get to there. But if the repercussions are too great or too severe, you would like to think that fighters would start to look to do it the right way.
The board didn't cover themselves in any glory, did they, with the Conor Benn scenario?
But at the same time, I agree with you completely. But at the same time, the board, they've got their hands tied so much. I mean, financially as well, haven't they? They're not exactly rolling in another. I mean, look at if we go back to the Tyson Fury saga. Tyson Fury obviously popped dirty. He then was threatening to sue the board at one point, I believe, and that's when the decision then was made to have a backdated 2-year ban, which it turned out Tyson Fury had already then served. If you're going to start bringing litigation against, or the threat of litigation against the British Boxing Board of Control, there's not a lot that they can really do. And again, that was the same with Conor Benn. You heard Conor Benn himself. You heard members of his team, coaches, his promoter, all talking about the fact of they were looking to bring litigation against several parties, including the British Boxing Board of Control, because they didn't believe that confidentiality was at the forefront and things like that. So for me, the British Boxing Control, it's just my opinion, they're not fit for purpose anymore. There is certain aspects of what they do where they are world class. Fighter Care, for example, we've got the best border control in the world when it comes to having things like paramedics on site quick, having gas in there, things like that. We are the best there for that. So fighter safety is we're up there.
I would like to make the point that they don't pay for that service, that the promotion of the show paid for them services. So again, the British Boxing Board of Control are a limited company, so they're only as good as the bottom line.
Yeah. I like you say, the promoter will pay for that service, but I think it's part of the stipulation, the British Boxing Board of Control. Yeah, they won't license an event without that being in place.
The only point I'd make is they don't pick the tab up for it. That's the only point I'd make.
Yeah, for sure. But then I think if they had to, they couldn't. Let's be honest. We need to see severe bans. We need to.
I think Robert Smith does a good job at the head of the British Boxing Board of Control within what he can, within the realms of the possible.
Yeah, for what he can control, he does a good job. The problem is he hasn't got enough control. For me, that's the problem. The British Boxing Board of Control has its limitations. That's the problem.
So if you had a magic wand then, mate, if you had a magic wand, what would you do in the sport of boxing? Forget about territories, forget about different commissions and the board. If you had a magic wand, what would you do to make this problem? I'm not going to say it's go away, because I don't think you'll make it go away. But how do you make it better?
It'll never go away, because there's always going to be somebody who's able to manipulate the system. But for me, you need a completely independent adjudicator there who's judge and jury. They aren't financially dependent on anybody within the realm of boxing, and they have the ability to not only test, but then sanction people who have failed tests. Full investigations and sanctioning of the results that they find. That is the only way that you're going to have a robust system whereby nobody is influenced in any capacity.
Just on the last point, Eddie Hearn has gone on interviews and told the public how much it costs to test fighters, because I believe he's one of the most frequent testers within the game. That's got to be looked at, right? It can't be that expensive, can it? Especially when you get down to the small hall shows where the margin just isn't there.
It makes it nigh on impossible for those small hall shows to really do testing. When he's spoken about the financials, it's eye-watering, to be honest. It's just so unachievable for people who aren't really at the top end of the sport at times. It's crazy. There's got to be a way that we can make it affordable and make it as a standard for shows, small hall right up to stadium fights. There's got to be a way that can happen. And I just refuse to believe that with all of the minds that we have, I mean, we're in an era where we've got some of the greatest minds boxing's ever seen on that promotional side. I refuse to believe that they couldn't all get together like they are now, making great fights. But
some of the biggest turnover at the top end of the game. So a bit like football, with grassroots football, some of that money needs to filter down. And I believe that they should do testing as a percentage of the gross profit on a show, on a card. That's how I believe it should do.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. It's, as I say, anything at the moment could be an improvement, because it's just happening way too frequent now, and there's no real punishment. I mean, if we look back just in recent history, Ryan Garcia, where did he get? 12-month suspension. It was served, but some of it was backdated, I believe. So really, he was out for 6 months, longer than he would have been. It's nothing. Canelo, 6-month ban or suspension. Conor Benn just decided to go and fight in another area, fight in a different country. Yeah. We still have fighters who are fighting on UK soil with Irish border control licenses. Why is that being allowed? There's a reason they've not got a British boxing border control license. Why is it able to happen? So yeah, whatever happens, it needs to be uniform across boxing. It can't be a case of we have certain territories, we have certain organizations running different ways, and it has to be uniform, and it has to be a group of people who are completely impartial and are not financially dependent on the big names in boxing at the moment, i.e. your promoters, Uncle Turkey, people like that. Is it a pipe dream? At the minute, I think it is. But that's where we need to be, because otherwise, all we're going to start to see, all we're going to continue to see, is life-changing injuries to boxers.
I think boxing as a sport needs to look at entry to the sport, because let's be honest, anybody can put a show on if they've got enough pound notes in the pocket. There's no stipulations to putting a fight on, becoming a promoter, becoming a manager. Yes, you have to get your license from the British Boxing Board of Control, but what I'm told, that's not particularly difficult. So on a bit of a wider point, boxing's probably got to have a good look at itself. regarding barriers to entry, etc., things like that.
The thing is, what do you think about the potential to not only look at sanctioning fighters, but the coaches, the promoters? Do you know what I mean? Because it's all well and good. If we look at this, look at, say, the Conor Benn situation, and yeah, his promoter backed him 100% from the start. Unwavering support from Eddie Hearn for Conor Benn. But let's just say that situation works out differently and Conor Benn is sanctioned. Could we look at possibly putting some kind of sanction on the promoter?
Difficult. Where do you draw that line though? Because my initial feeling is that was a little bit unfair to start sanctioning Eddie Hearn on the back of a fighter and what he's ingested into his body. Hearn's not there all the time. Let's be honest. So maybe close that circle a little bit to his coaches and fight team, maybe.
Yeah. So, for example, in Conor Benn, the Sims. If we looked at this Eddie Reynoso situation, he's now had confirmed 4 of his fighters have all popped dirty. Bearing in mind as well as that, Ryan Garcia, who spent the majority of his career with Eddie Reynoso, yes, he popped dirty under Derek James, but again, had a huge association with Eddie Reynoso. Lewis Neary, he popped dirty around about the time I'm sure he was still with Reynoso and then left to go to Freddie Roach. Potentially, you're talking there's 6 fighters now who have had an association with that gym.
Though, isn't it? Because you could be penalising another fighter who's done nothing wrong, who loses his coach because of another fighter's activity. Difficult.
But would it not then make the coaching staff start to look at what their fighters are doing?
In the sport, the ripple effect, we could bring them numbers down, I suppose. But interesting. It's an interesting scenario.
Again, I think you just need that shockwave, don't you? And once, yeah. But at the moment, we're getting the same thing, aren't we, with people who are suffering life-changing injuries and not being able to then earn the money that they should be able to earn. So, yeah, there's always going to be pros and cons. You're never going to find a system that works for everybody. It's impossible. But we need to be doing more. That's
and I believe in this country, it sits with the border control to be exploring every single avenue that they possibly can, especially funding it as well. That should be, it needs to be explored regarding where can they siphon the money off from fight cards to be paying for this drug testing. Interesting.
Well, obviously there's always been a lot of things said about where money goes with the British Boxing Board of Control. I mean, the big one recently was the Chris Eubank Jr. fine that he got for the egg incident, and then for missing weight and things like that. Where does these fines actually go to? I think it was Carl Froch who actually on his
official
podcast,
line is that it goes to boxing charities.
Yeah. But then you hear a lot of people who are within the game and immersed in it who have always said they've never seen any proof of that. Now, I would like to hope that what Robert is saying is, I'd like to think that what we're being told is the truth. But there's questions being asked, isn't there? And it's hard to look away when the questions are being asked.
Another area that I'll do a video on very soon is what Barry McGuigan's trying to get off the ground, what Paul Smith's trying to get off the ground regarding fighters' pensions and post-fight career services. So we'll do another video on that. But just to finish this one off then, Mick. So I've gave you a little bit more time to think about it. So you all depend now. You all depend to the boxing, the sport of boxing, and you're going to resolve the drug issues within the sport. What's the first thing you'd do?
Like I said before, I'd be looking to set up an independent, completely governing body who has the capability to not only test at an affordable level, but also then act upon that testing. When they do get adverse findings, they can then act upon it. And we have a structured framework to any kind of suspension, any kind of ban, any kind of sanction. And when we see people like Jarrell Miller, for example, we look at lifetime bans. That's it.
Here's one option for you. We could go on all night, but I'll just throw this one on the table. Clearly, they're not in favour of banning these people, are they, for life? So what about if they had to pay a kind of surcharge or an additional tariff on any future fight versus post prosecution?
It would have to be sizable, though, wouldn't it? It would have to be sizable because, I mean, you see it in other fight sports. For example, so look at UFC, for example. You miss weight. Just, I know it's not drugs, but you miss weight. You get docked 20% of your purse for that fight. It's not enough. You see people who will purposely miss weight because they're earning such a high amount that the 20%, they can afford to lose it. So what you're saying, it could work, but it has to be a sizable amount that makes it a massive deterrent. If I'm going to lose 50% of the purse where I'm earning 3 million, then by the time I take out all my costs and everything for camp, I'm literally earning very, very little.
I'm talking about for the rest of the career as well, not just for the next fight, for the rest of the career.
Yeah. So make it whereby their earnings are severely impacted. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's a good idea. But it has to be
about where this funding's coming from for a governing body. I know this is a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas. I love that saying. I'm glad I got it in. What about the governing bodies having to pay a percentage a year to fund the governing body?
What are you talking about? People like the WBC, WBO?
Correct. Let's be honest, they take a lot of money in sanction fees, etc. And you know, you could even bring the RBO into this and a couple of others that are maybe less recognised. But what about if they had to pay a percentage to formulate this governing body?
Well, I mean, look at any kind of title. This is why we've got the cornflake box titles that some of them chuck out. I mean, WBA's got something like 60 world champions, haven't they? In 17 divisions. They're making a massive amount of money on these sanctioning fees, where it's 3% is the fee that everyone chucked around, but they're making it on so many fighters now. Surely some of that could be contributed, like you say.
The governing bodies want a clean sport, like we all do. I'm sure they do. So they might have to put their hands in the pocket a little bit to formulate this governing body who can regulate the sport. Just an idea.
It's a statement. It's a statement because at the moment, a lot of people seem to. I mean, if you look at the reaction online, look at on social media, and especially Maurizio Suleiman, the amount of grief he gets when anything like this starts or happens, because there's a. I mean, all of those guys who are in Reynoso's gym, they've all been either WBC champions or fighting for WBC belts. That's not a good look.
We want to be the era that cleans this up, right? How great would it be to be the era of boxing where we formed a governing body and we cleaned this up as much as we could, because it ain't going away, is it? Let's be honest. But we can make inroads into the numbers, right?
Exactly. It's a lasting legacy for everybody around at this point, isn't it? Like you said, it'll never go away because there's always going to be somebody who finds a way of manipulating the system. You're going to get fighters who say they're retired and whatever else and could be using for 18 months and then suddenly go clean, come back. That I think that's the common misconception is, you'll get some fighters who are found on fight night with a failed test, but 9 times out of 10, fighters are getting found before it's testing before the fight. that's where the damage is done with these performance-enhancing drugs and these banned substances. It's not on fight night. It's in the camp leading up to that fight.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. That's
Exactly.
half an hour. We make a bit of a darker subject tonight on Nasbel boxing, but we like to cover the entire sport. Agree, disagree with me and Mick, post your comments below. I feel I need to get the word. All our views are personal views and not one of the channel. And get a word allegedly in there as well, Mick. So I don't think we've said anything out of order. Very interesting topic. Like I've said, post your comments below. Like, comment, subscribe. This has been Last Ball Boxing, proudly sponsored by SC Travel and LW Lifting. And we'll see you on the live on Thursday. Cheers, Mick.
Thank you.